Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, anyways, man, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video by Dante's Boxing Nation. So, now that the time has finally ended when it comes to the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder trilogy, for the LDBC and new media and all these people that tried to tear down Tyson Fury hunting season is basically over. But Canelo Alvarez season has just basically opened up again. And what I mean by that is that Canelo Alvarez is usually their number one target. And the reason why that is because Canelo Alvarez, if you're, a decently logical and objective person, and if you have a realistic scope, especially in the boxing scene, you know more than likely that Canelo Alvarez is the number one pound for pound fighter in all the boxing. At least I personally believe so, because when I take a look at Canelo Alvarez, there just is not another fighter that, in my opinion, has his type of accomplishments. He is a four-weight division champion when it comes down to it. On top of that, he has won a lot of belts. He's beaten a lot of champions when they held the belt. Canelo Alvarez is also debatably the most skilled fighter in the world, and his resume is second to none, at least when we talk about fighters heading into the 2020s that are fighting in their prime. So Canelo Alvarez, in my opinion, does have to be the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. And of course, Canelo Alvarez, he is going to have a very big fight against Caleb Plant, which I believe is going to be on Showtime pay-per-view. I'm going to release my prediction probably very soon on that, because whenever it comes to Canelo Alvarez predictions, I tend to predict it about either a month or 3 to 2 weeks in advance, just so a certain amount of people can see it. And I think that that's going to be a very great fight. I think, of course, Caleb Plant has a very tall task ahead of him, but Caleb Plant is a very talented fighter, and the fact that he is trying to train with Andre Ward, who was one of the best technicians of his day, I think that that was a very, very good move. I think actually that was a very similar move that Deontay Wilder probably should have done for his Tyson Fury third match, and I think that he should have went to the Mayweather gym. Or maybe training with Andre Ward would have helped, but Deontay Wilder's a little bit too prideful because he felt that both of those guys were against him. So it is what it is. But anyways, we're going to hear what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say. Let's get into it.
Canelo, you a bitch. I'm putting it out there. No, I don't like to disrespect men that step into the ring, but then you fighting Kirtland that hasn't been in the ring since Glenn Tapia. Well, you have an opportunity to fight Demetrius Andrade for the WBO.
I like Demetrius Andrade. I think that he's a talented fighter. And I think that with his type of style and with his type of height, he may give Canelo Alvarez some problems, but only for a certain amount of time. I like Andrade. I think that he's somewhat talented, but this dude and his talent, I think that he's been heavily overrated for a very, very long time. And it's no offense against him, but every time I see this dude fight, it's always a very lackluster performance. There's a couple times here and there where he finally does live up to expectations, like against that one African fighter that he fought a few years ago. But there's a lot of performances in Demetrius Andrade's career, including his last one against that Liam Williams dude, that one, tough little British fighter. Demetrius Andrade, you can actually argue that he's had more unimpressive performances in his career than actual A-grade performances, at least in certain ones. I'm not going to say that he has not had some phenomenal performances, and I'm not saying that maybe he would not try to step up to the plate against Canelo, but I just think that he's a little bit too hittable. I don't think he has an A-grade chin, and that's not me saying that he has a weak chin, but he is able to get knocked down, he is able to get hurt. Sometimes he leaves his chin wide open in the air. And all in all, I don't see how he beats Canelo. I've already said this. I don't see how any of those 168 or 160 pound fighters, I don't see how any of them beat Canelo. The only two that, in my opinion, have a possible chance would either be Demetrius Andrade or Caleb Plant. And Caleb Plant, I think, in certain areas could debatably be more talented than a Demetrius Andrade. Some people may disagree. Now, there's certain areas where I think that Demetrius Andrade, you could argue, is a little bit better than Caleb Plant. I would say that Demetrius Andrade is a little bit more defensively responsible at times than the Caleb Plant. But on top of that, Caleb Plant, this is my opinion, I think that he actually has better feet than Demetrius Andrade. And certain people may disagree, but we'll see what happens. I also believe that Caleb Plant has better hand speed. Neither of them, in my opinion, have a great power. There's been a certain amount of them overall that complain that Caleb Plant, he does not have the pop in his punches. Trust me, Demetrius Andrade does not have that A-grade pop in his punches either. That's not me saying that he cannot punch. But to really get Canelo Alvarez off of you, you have to have A-grade power. A really great amount of power. There's certain times, don't get me wrong, Canelo does not like to get hit. So, at times you can maybe push him back. Like Billy Joe was able to push him back a little bit here and there. But to keep Canelo off of you consistently, you have to have great power. Like, you're talking about a dude overall that was able to withstand Lara's power, who actually is a very underrated puncher, Gennady Golovkin's power. You're talking about a dude that was able to fight with Miguel Cotto. I mean, very rarely do I ever see Canelo Alvarez get hurt.
In the sport of boxing, people want to be a champion.
William on Twitter asks, "Hey Canelo, why have you continually refused to fight Demetrius Andrade? Never at 154 or at 160, and he holds a belt. You call him boring, but you smash Billy Joe Saunders, and his style is similar."
No, he's a horrible fighter. I don't never want to fight with him. He fought with.
He's a horrible fighter. Oh man, what I'm gonna say is this: I do think a part of Canelo Alvarez does realize that if he were to face Andrade would be somewhat of a problematic style. But I just don't think that Demetrius Andrade can beat Canelo. That, in my personal opinion, I don't think that he can do it. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but very, very tall task. I don't think Andrade has the defensive ability. I don't think overall that he has good enough feet. I think that sometimes he keeps his chin way too high up in the air. I think Andrade is a talented fighter, but all in all, I've just seen him have way too many unimpressive performances.
Anybody's. He fought with anybody's.
He fought with anybody's.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So as you're seeing right there on Brian Custer's show, Canelo Alvarez is starting to finally get asked new media type of questions. Real questions that boxing fans want answers to. Now, the only problem right there is Brian Custer. He could have followed up on that question, and he could have easily said, "So Canelo, do you believe that Yildirim is a better fighter than Andrade? Do you believe that Caleb Plant?"
Right, but, these people, they always try to say overall, well, is Yildirim and overall, who the hell was that one dude's name? That one, that one worthless British fighter he fought a couple fights ago. Not Callum Smith, because Callum Smith, in my opinion, was actually decently talented, even though he was a bit straight up. But, Rocky Fielding, I think was his name. Whatever the hell his name was. That dude was completely useless. But when it came down to, those fighters are understandable. But Billy Joe Saunders overall and Callum Smith and Caleb Plant, yes, those fighters are near to the same level of a Demetrius Andrade. Now, do I think that Billy Joe Saunders is 100% as talented as Andrade? Well, he's someone on that level. And a certain amount of people can disagree, but let's be real. Is Andrade really someone that has proved that he's this super duper talented fighter? Maybe in your opinion he has. In my opinion he hasn't. Every time that I've seen Andrade fight, I've usually not been that impressed, whether it be against Vanes Martirosyan or whether it be against his last dude, Liam Williams, I think was his name was. I'm sorry. I've never usually been super duper impressed with Demetrius Andrade. I think that he's a decent fighter. But when it comes down to the overall, I just don't see this all-time great talent there. I just don't see it. I think he's a decent fighter. But when it comes down to the overall, like I said, I don't see the same level that many other people see with him. And if I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong. But I just don't see it.
Is a better fighter.
And Caleb Plant, all in all, in my opinion, you certainly can debate that he's a better fighter than Demetrius Andrade. I mean, let's be real. How many big wins does Demetrius Andrade have in his career? The biggest win of his career to this day still remains Vanes Martirosyan. And Vanes Martirosyan gave that dude hell. All right?
Than Demetrius Andrade. Hell, do you believe around 40 of the opponents you've already beat were better fighters than Demetrius Andrade? Those are all rhetorical questions.
Come on, Dante. Why would you even ask him overall about the first 40-something fights in his career? Canelo Alvarez started boxing at the age of 13. Why would you even ask that? Of course not. That's like asking Mike Tyson overall, well, do you think overall that Evander Holyfield overall is a worse fighter than some of the guys that you fought with in your first 20, your first 30 fights? Of course not. It is what it is. I don't think that he thinks overall that Andrade is worse than some of the fighters he fought early on. But Canelo Alvarez overall, I think that he looks at Andre, and I think overall that he just looks at Andre and he says, this dude is just worth a little bit more trouble than he's actually worth. I don't think that Andre, all in all, I don't think that he's this super huge money fight, and all in all, he does provide a challenging style. I think that's the way Canelo Alvarez looks at it.
If you guys look right here at Canelo Alvarez's record, you will find...
Which is why, in my opinion, if Demetrius Andrade really wants that Canelo Alvarez fight, he's going to have to fight bigger name opponents. And certain people may disagree with me, but you're going to have to call out David Benavidez. You're going to have to try to fight Jamal Charlo. Even go after Danny Jacobs. I'm sorry, but Demetrius Andrade, for him allegedly always wanting these big fights, you know, he certainly does not always call out the big names. Let me just say that. You even could call out a Chris Eubank Jr., and that would do wonders for your career. Andrade has such a weak resume, and I'm sorry, but it is what it is. Once again, that's not me saying that he's not talented. But who have you fought, dude? Like, you fought Vanes Martirosyan. I guess I'll give you a little bit of a pat on the back for that. But who else? You know, like, no one. I barely know anyone on this dude's resume. It is what it is.
You know, he has fought tons of horrible fighters. So why discriminate on the quote-unquote horrible fighters that you fight? Look right here, guys. Did any of you guys know that Canelo Alvarez had a draw on his record against an opponent that was 3-5? That means 3 wins and 5 losses? But yet, you call Demetrius Andrade horrible? We know what time it is. Listen, man, I've always...
Dante points that out. What they don't realize is Canelo Alvarez, once again, he started professional boxing when he was about 13 years old. It was the same thing when these guys tried to tear down Lomachenko because of his Orlando Salido loss, not realizing, or they did realize it, they just didn't care, that Vasyl Lomachenko, that he was getting used to professional boxing, and that was the second bout of his career. It's not like Lomachenko overall was a Leo Santa Cruz and fought bums for his first, 20 fights.
Said this. Canelo Alvarez, he actually was making himself look better when he wasn't speaking in English, when he wasn't repeating these race fans' talking points. Because, see, these racists on the internet, they can easily make up whatever they want to because they're not going to be held accountable. They remain anonymous on the internet, right? So they can make up whatever they want to make up, right? But Canelo cannot do that for the simple fact that everything he has said for years and years and years has already been recorded. Everything that he has done in the ring has been recorded. Which is why I always tell you guys the most dangerous weapon in the world is what? A microphone and a camera. It can work against you or it can work for you. And recently it has really been working against Canelo Alvarez. People keep saying that Canelo, he learned so much from the Floyd Mayweather loss. The only thing he learned was to never fight an undefeated black fighter again. Unless...
Dante tries to strip so much credit away from Canelo Alvarez. But the truth is about Canelo is that he's fought a lot of great fighters. He fought Miguel Cotto. He fought Sergey Kovalev. I'm sorry, this is just my opinion. And Sergey Kovalev was not even at the best point in his career. That version of Sergey Kovalev is more of a threat than Demetrius Andrade or Jamal Charlo or David Benavidez, in my opinion, any day. And certain people are going to disagree with that, but that's just the way that I look at it.
That black fighter is a welterweight moving up in weight, or if all of a sudden that fighter is starting to look flawed. Listen, guys, you can go...
So, where is that same energy overall with Gervonta Tank Davis? Where is that same energy with Terrence Crawford? Are you going to say that Terrence Crawford fought Sean Porter, overall, who was Kell Brook, Keith Thurman, and Errol Spence Jr. leftovers? Are you going to say that Gervonta Tank Davis, when he fought Mario Barrios, and when he's now fighting Rolly Romero, that he's really fighting people that are very, very flawed? How come you don't have that same energy? I'm not saying that here and there that Canelo may not pick fights, and I'm not saying that Canelo Alvarez does not realize that Demetrius Andrade has a little bit of a tricky style. I do think that Canelo Alvarez may be, avoiding the Andrade fight. There may be some sort of substance to that. But when it comes down to the overall, at the end of the day, Canelo has fought a hell of a lot of champions. And he's fought a hell of a lot of great fighters. And in my opinion, Andrade, Canelo, he's not going to give you that fight unless you trap him in a corner. It is what it is, because I think Canelo looks at Andrade the same way that a lot of people take a look at these Cuban fighters. They overall take a look at some of these Cuban fighters that, they're good fighters, but when it comes down to it, that's not a big money fight. And it's really worth a hell of a lot more trouble than it's actually worth.
Back and watch my post-fight video when Danny Jacobs fought Derek Yanchenko. I said in that video, after that performance, I would not be surprised if Canelo takes the Danny Jacobs fight. And keep in mind, Danny Jacobs
Danny Jacobs won that fight 8-4. So many people overrate that when it comes down to it and say Danny Jacobs, he looks so unimpressive. Danny Jacobs has never been this dude that is super technically sound. But Danny Jacobs, when it comes down to it overall, Danny Jacobs is a very dangerous fighter. And Canelo fought him. So you have to give him credit for that. Dante, let's be real. If it were Andrade or Jamal Charlo or one of your favorite fighters that was facing Danny Jacobs next, you'd be throwing a super huge party. You'd be saying overall how they deserve all this credit and all this other bullshit. So let's just be real. All right? You got to give Canelo Alvarez his credit. I'm not saying that here and there that, I don't agree or that I agree with every single move that he does, or overall I'm not saying here and there that maybe he may not pick fights. But all in all, man, Canelo Alvarez, his resume compared to anyone else in boxing right now that is in their prime, I don't think any other resume compares.
An undefeated black fighter. He had 2 losses and had been knocked out previously. Just like this man on the screen, Rocky Fielding, had previously been knocked.
So why don't you say the same thing with Devin Haney when he fought Jorge Linares? Why don't you say the same thing with Devonta Tank Davis when he fought Yuriorkis Gamboa? You won't say it there, but you'll say it with Canelo Alvarez. And just because overall a fighter ended up getting a couple losses in their career does not mean overall that they're done. Once again, Terrence Crawford is facing Sean Porter next month. Are we going to sit here and allege overall that, well, that's not even really that good of a fight because Sean Porter already has 3 losses in his career? Like, that's a cherry pick. That would be stupid to say that. Understandably, I understand that Canelo Alvarez, that, I understand that some people are frustrated that he does not seem to have much interest in a Demetrius Andrade. But Canelo is still facing great fighters. Like, these guys act like this dude is facing just complete bums. Like he's a Terrence Crawford or something.
Out before Canelo fought him. See, when you guys try to compare Canelo to Floyd, you make him look worse. Because by way of contrast, everyone that Floyd Mayweather fought came off of their biggest win. Almost every single opponent that Canelo Alvarez faced were coming off of their worst performance. From Billy Joe Saunders to Rocky Fielding to Avni.
That's a bullshit lie. That is a bunch of bullshit. When he fought Sergey Kovalev knocked out that one British fighter. I believe his name was Yard or whatever the hell his name was, Anthony Yard. He also completely outboxed that one Colombian dude, I believe Eleider Alvarez, who completely, knocked him out in the first fight, but then Sergey Kovalev completely outperformed him in the second fight. So let's not go there. Sergey Kovalev overall, he was still at a very good point in his career, and all in all, Canelo Alvarez beat a good version of him. Now, once again, do I think that it was the same Sergey Kovalev that Andre Ward fought? No, I don't. But when it comes down to it, Canelo Alvarez, he still very clearly fought a good version of Sergey Kovalev. When he fought Billy Joe Saunders was an undefeated fighter, and he had a phenomenal performance over Martin Murray. He completely dominated the fight and hurt Martin Murray multiple times. When he fought Gennady Golovkin was looked at as the unanimous best middleweight in the world. When he fought Danny Jacobs, he had overall a decent performance over Sergey Derevyanchenko, but what we know about Sergey Derevyanchenko is that he's not going to win any of the big fights, but he's going to give you hell. That's what Sergey Derevyanchenko is going to do. And when he fought Austin Trout was a dude that just came off of a win over Miguel Cotto. And when we talk about Erislandy Lara overall was coming off of a series of good wins, I believe over Alfredo Angulo and Austin Trout. So miss me with that, Canelo fights people off their worst performances. Bullshit. That's a bunch of horse shit.
He was coming off of a loss. Danny Jacobs, Amir Khan, even Caleb Plant.
Actually, he wasn't fighting Amir Khan coming off of a loss. You know who was? Terrence Crawford. Or I won't say overall that he was fighting Amir Khan coming off of a loss, but he fought Amir Khan when he was completely done. Isn't that so interesting? Haven't we heard Aki TV and Dante's Boxing Nation allege like 30 damn times that Terrence Crawford has such a good resume because he fought Amir Khan and all in all, he fought Kell Brook? Answer me this question. Did Terrence Crawford face a prime Amir Khan or a prime Kell Brook, or did he face them when basically they were a piece of brisket? Like, let's be real.
Smith, This is why it's so funny that
Callum Smith is another dude that he fought that was undefeated. Callum Smith, I understand that Callum Smith, he's not necessarily someone that you take a look at and say, wow, he's super duper technically sound. But Callum Smith is a very strong dude. Like that guy, that guy can punch. And on top of that, he has a couple good wins in his career.
Canelo Alvarez uses the word horrible fighter because in order to get a fight with Canelo Alvarez, you have to look like a horrible fighter. You can't look like the best fighter or the best possible opponent. You have to look like the worst opponent. You have to put on a horrible performance to get a fight against Canelo Alvarez.
And if we're also talking about Caleb Plant has looked decently impressive in his career as well. He had a little bit of a tough fight with Jose Uzcategui, but that was a little bit expected because, first of all, I don't even think Caleb Plant was favored in that fight. Secondly, when it comes down to it, Jose Uzcategui was a very decent fighter at the time. We're talking about a dude that knocked out Andre Durrell.
That has been proven. And this is the reason why I would not be surprised if Canelo Alvarez takes the Jamal Charlo fight. He would be...
Now he's basically saying that, you know, even though he's been bitching this whole entire time, that he wants Canelo Alvarez to face Charlo because he's been allegedly ducking him. Now, apparently, overall, he doesn't want him. So, basically, do you not want him to, you know, take the Jamal Charlo fight right now? Is that what you're saying? Do you want to wait until Jamal Charlo has a better performance and then Canelo Alvarez, then he can face him? You know? Anyway.
Be smart to take it now. Because there's a very good possibility that the higher level of danger has expired since Canelo Alvarez has waited so long to fight Charlo.
Jamal Charlo would have never beat Canelo Alvarez. And Jamal Charlo, in that last fight against Juan Macias Montiel, is the same old Jamal Charlo that I've always seen. Not a lot of head movement, foot speed overall that ain't that great when it comes down to it. Good counter-punching ability, but not A-grade when it comes down to it, at least compared to a Canelo Alvarez. Jamal Charlo, like I said, he pretty much is a bigger version of Danny Garcia.
Oh, and once again, we've seen Charlo look worse than he's ever looked before. Now, we won't know probably until we see Jamal in the ring again if that was just a bad performance or he is starting to fade. But Canelo...
He's not starting to fade. It's just Jamal Charlo, I think possibly he underestimated Juan Macias Montiel a little bit. And on top of that, when it came down to it, Jamal Charlo, he's always had his faults. Both Charlo brothers are very flawed fighters. In fact, they really did not even start to get a great amount of hype behind them until they really started to get more belts in the divisions. These guys actually did not used to like them that much until they started using their names to really, you know, tear down Canelo Alvarez. But it is what it is.
Would be a fool not to take the fight now before someone else ends up beating Jamal Charlo. Now, I've heard rumors that Jamal Charlo may actually be considering a rematch with Montiel, which would be a good fight, actually. But once again, if Canelo Alvarez is...
If Jamal Charlo fights Canelo Alvarez, he would get killed. He would not even have a chance. Jamal Charlo, I don't even think he has much of a chance. I give him a 20% chance at most. If Jamal Charlo fought Canelo, oh man, he'd get completely killed.
Smart. He will take that fight before anyone else did. Just like he snatched up the Caleb Plant fight, just like he snatched up the Kovalev fights.
Right, but did Caleb Plant, all in all, did he have a very unimpressive performance?
And the Billy Joe Saunders fights. He would not take no for an answer. Even if these white fighters wanted extra money, he said, whatever you want, I just need you in the...
You hear what Dante said there? Even if these white fighters... Isn't Dante always trying to spread this bullshit to where I'm Team America #1 and all sort of bullshit? Caleb Plant's an American fighter. How come overall, you know, you ain't saying that he's super duper talented? Because once again, Dante's a huge race fan as well. We don't know that, but it is what it is. Now, certain Caucasian fighters, of course, are they always the most talented? Not all of them. But Caleb Plant very clearly is a very talented fighter. And like I said, when I take a look at Caleb Plant and Jamal Charlo and Billy Joe Saunders and David Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade, there really is no huge separation in terms of level. I mean, does anyone look at Demetrius Andrade, anyone who looks at him realistically, and say, wow, he's so much more talented than Caleb Plant? I don't. Once again, take a look at his performances against Jack Colkay, Liam Williams, Vanes Martirosyan. Like, this dude's talent has been so overrated for years upon years upon years. He's a decent fighter, don't get me wrong, and I think that he could give Canelo Alvarez certain problems. But do I see any of these guys actually beating Canelo? Hell no. There's no fighters within the 160 or 168 pound divisions that can have a 50-50 chance against Canelo. I just don't see it. And if I'm wrong about that, then I'm wrong. But I just don't see it.
Because you're a guaranteed win, right? Once again, Canelo is constantly contradicting himself. He tells Andre, you want payday. Caleb Plant, Smith, and Kovalev, they all told Canelo Alvarez, I want a big payday. Nah, you're not offering enough. I want way more than that, Canelo. Canelo, he knew all of these white fighters wanted a big payday, and he gave it to them, right? So it's not about you being a horrible fighter. It's not about you wanting a payday. It's about who you are when you're a horrible fighter and you want a payday. Right now, Canelo Alvarez has a restaurant, and he's refusing to serve undefeated black boxers. So I guess if he was asked...
That's a bunch of horse shit, because Canelo Alvarez, he's fought elite black fighters before, but you notice overall that he's saying undefeated black boxers because besides Demetrius Andrade and Jamal Charlo, and possibly Jamel Charlo, who else could you be talking about? Because besides those two fighters, in the 160 and 168 pound divisions, what other elite black fighters are there? There's none. So it is what it is. I mean, there's Danny Jacobs, but Canelo already fought him. And of course, Dante, he can't give credit to Canelo Alvarez in that area, so he has to try to degrade Danny Jacobs as much as he could.
How come you don't service these undefeated black fighters in your restaurant? He would say because they're horrible customers. But right now, the walls are closing in. There's more pressure on Canelo Alvarez, and eventually, he may have no choice but to serve those black fighters in his restaurant. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. Fellas, I've got some great news for you.
Anyways, that's really about it for this video. I thought all in all that I would talk about that, but I just thought that was interesting. We'll see all in all what happens with Canelo Alvarez. I do think that there is some truth to Canelo maybe not wanting to face Demetrius Andrade because he has a little bit of a challenging style. But this is just me personally. When I take a look at Demetrius Andrade and when I take a look at him in all of his big fights, you know, I think that he's a decent fighter. He's physically talented and, you know, all in all, he does have some skills, but I've never seen him on that same talent level as people have always described. But it is what it is. In terms of Charlo, I believe that fight is going to happen very, very soon. And Dante, he's already making excuses to why Jamal Charlo might lose that fight. So we'll see what happens with that. But anyways, that'll be very interesting. We'll see what happens. And I'll talk to you all later.